Hello friends, welcome you all to another video. And yesterday as we have started the sonnet number 138, which was written by William Shakespeare, and the title of this sonnet is When My Love Swears That She Is Made of Truth. And actually yesterday I have read all the 14 lines of this sonnet, and as well as I have completed 4 to 5 lines. So again I would like to repeat myself, and here at the right corner you can see the summary of the sonnet number 138. So let me repeat myself. When the woman swears that she is honest, and when she is saying that she is honest in her love, so the poet, believes on her, even though he knew that she is lying. And again he is doing so because she will think that he is a naive young person, unexperienced in the ways of the world. So in this way he pretends that she thinks he is young, even though she knows that he is getting on in years. It means that he is old. So although she knows that he is an experienced person, although she knew that he has enjoyed his young days, so up to 8 until 8 otherwise, and even though she trusts on him and he trusts on her, so that is the mutual understanding of the love we have seen in the yesterday's video. So now I am going to read out the remaining lines, and then we are going to start with the explaining of one by one line. So now I am reading, you also read with me. Simply I credit her false speaking tongue on both sides, thus is simple truth suppressed. But wherefore says she is not, she is unjust, and wherefore say not I that I am old. Oh, my love is best habit, is in seeing trust, and age in love loves not to have years told. Therefore I lie with her and she with me, and in our faults by lies we flatter be. So here we can say that, okay, so the poet is saying that he pretend to believe in her lies. So in this way, similar way, neither side is truthful, nor his side is truthful, nor her side is truthful. Okay, but love is pretending to trust one another, and because the old people don't like to have their age revealed to their lovers, therefore he lies to her and she lies to him. As a result, despite their faults, these lies makes them feel better. Okay, so that is very important. We can see about these lines. So let's start with the that you understood, I think, though, what actually here the poet is saying. Okay, so simply I credit her false speaking tongue. So simply because he know that she is lying, and he also knows that she knew that he is also lying. So both are pretending that they are telling truth, but both are lying. So even though they are simply crediting that they are trusting each other, so therefore the poet is saying that he credited her false speaking tongue. On both sides, thus is simple truth suppressed. So both the side, from the poet's side and from the beloved side, both are hiding the truth. Both are lying to each other. But even though they knew that they are lying, but even though they are accepting that lie as a truth. Okay, so that is what the poet is here saying. But wherefore say she is not, she is unjust, and wherefore say not I that I am old. Okay, so here the poet is saying that why doesn't she admit that she lies? Okay, he asked that why doesn't she admit that she is lying, she is not telling truth, and wherever say that am I old, and again he is saying that why I am not admitting that I am also old. Okay, so here at the one hand the poet is asking that why that woman, his beloved, is not admitting, not accepting that she is lying, and at the other side the poet is asking himself that why he is not admitting that he is old. So that is the two questions he raised here, and the following lines are actually the answers of his questions. So first the answer of the that why she is not accepting that she is unjust in the 11th line, oh love is best habit is in seeming trust. Okay, so actually here is saying that because the best thing about love is pretending to trust one another, so we must pretend to one another, so that is the best habit of the love, and therefore he just therefore she is not admitting that she is lying. Okay, because the best thing is that you should trust each other, and age in love loves not to have years told, and because old people don't like to have their age revealed to their lovers, so therefore poet doesn't want to reveal about his age, and neither she wanted to reveal her true age, so both are lying to each other. Okay, because in love nobody wanted to reveal their age, so that is important. And the last couplet of this sonnet is like that, therefore I lie with her and she with me, and in our faults by lies we fatter be. So therefore he lies to her and she lies to him, and as the result, despite their faults, these lies makes them feel better. So that is the good relationship. Okay, so in this way their relationship will be that good and nice. So let move to the theme of this poem is the truth and lies and love. So sonnet 138 plunges its reader into a complicated and fraught relationship. The poem speaker and the woman he loves both lie to each other constantly about matters large and small. For instance, the speaker's age and his mistress' unfaithfulness. As a result, the speaker feels deeply insecure and unsettled, unable to trust the person he loves, and indeed unable to place his trust in love itself. For the speaker of the poem, love is thus not a source of comfort and joy. Instead, he argues with considerably cynicism and bitterness, the only comfort that his relationship offers is the uncertain and privileged pleasure of mutual deception. Both the speaker and the woman he loves are habitually untruthful to each other. The poem opens with one such a lie. Although the speaker's love swears that she is made of truth, the speaker knows she lies. In other words, the speaker's mistress has been unfaithful to him, widely so as Shakespeare notes in sonnet number 135, and the speaker knows it. He doesn't have any illusion about his mistress' faithfulness. However, he insists paradoxically, I do believe her, though I know she lies. Basically, he doesn't actually believe his mistress, but he acts like he does. He does so for a key reason. It makes him seem naive and thus younger than he actually is. He wants to seem like some untutored youth. This is hardly a convincing ploy. The mistress knows fully well that the speaker's days are past best, that he is, in other words, getting old. So both the mistress and the speaker are lying to each other. And indeed, one lie leads to another. The mistress lies about whether she is cheated on the speaker, that leads him to lie about his age, and so on. And the speaker notes, summarizing the situation on both sides, thus is simple truth suppressed. The speaker and his mistress are trapped in a vicious cycle of lies, and they can't escape from it. In the series of rhetorical questions, the speaker briefly entertains the possibility that they might give up all these lies and simply be honest with each other. but he quickly dismisses the possibility. He offers two reasons. One of these reasons comes simply from vanity. He doesn't want the truth about his age to get out. Indeed, it seems like he doesn't want to admit it even to himself. The second reason is more subtle and more devastating. The best habit of love, he argues, is seemingly trust. In other words, the best thing about love is when lovers seem to trust each other. This is the dark and potentially heartbreaking argument. The speaker doesn't imagine that it is actually possible for him to trust his mistress, and instead of seeking comfort in love, he seeks comfort in deception. The best that he hopes for is that he and his mistress might seem to trust each other. However, as the speaker recognizes, this is an untenable position. Each time the lover lie to each other, they reinforce their faults. In our faults, by lies we fatal be, the relationship between them thus teeter on the brink of disaster, and disaster that they accelerate by continuing lying to each other. So actually, that is the thing of these themes of this poem, that is love, lie, and trust. Okay, so that was the theme. We can look at the theme, the trust, lie, and love. Truth, lies, and love, these are the theme of the poem. Now let's move to the symbol of the poem. The symbol is the tongue. In the line 7, the speaker accuses his mistress of having a false speaking tongue. The tongue serves as a complex symbol here. It has a set of meanings that would have been obvious to Shakespeare and his early readers, but which have dissolved in interweaving centuries. Most simply, the tongue is a stand in front of language, the words the mistress speaks, since it is a false speaking. It further symbolizes the way that the speaker's mistress seems to be like continually, compulsively. Her tongue seems almost incapable of speaking truthfully. The symbol thus calls into question the very possibility that the speaker's mistress might be honest and straightforward with him. These symbolic meanings are complemented by a deeper and culturally specific set of associations. In early modern England, women who spoke openly and freely were often considered to be sexually promiscuous. This highly misogynist trope served to police women's speech, or women were pressured to be silent in public for fear of calling their reputation into question. This is a trope that Shakespeare often invokes, and it is present in sonnet number 138. In some of his earlier sonnets, like sonnet 135, Shakespeare has accused his mistress of being sexually promiscuous. When Shakespeare accuses his mistress of having a false speaking tongue, then the symbol implies that her tongue is not only false thing about her. For the speaker, the mistress' habit of lying suggests of a deeper pattern of deceit, unfaithfulness, and promiscuity. Let's talk about the poetic device and figurative language used in the sonnet number 138. To end stop line, this figure of speech used here. You can see here truth, lies, youth, subtitles, young, best, tongue, suppress, unjust, old, trust, told me be. So here we can say that end stop line are there. So each line of sonnet number 138 is end stopped. That gives the poem a heavy, floating feeling. The long pause at the end of the poem shows down the poem's rhythm, decreasing its velocity. As a result, the reader has a sense that the speaker is struggling, exhausted from the demands that his relationship places on him. The reader can feel his dynamic in lines 9 to 12, but wherever says she is not she unjust, and wherever say not I that I am old. Oh, love's best habit is seeming trust, and age in love loves not to have years told. All of these are strong stops. The speaker rests heavily at the end of each line. The speaker seems weighted down by the complicated, impossible questions he is asking himself. He cannot see a way out or a way forward. The poem's use of end stop thus helps to communicate the difficulty of the speaker's situation and the deep sadness he feels as he contemplates his relationship, unable to see a way out of his complicated and unpleasant situation. He plods forward slowly and unhappily toward the poem's conclusion. That said, the drag that these end stop place on the poem are somehow compensated by other devices. For instance, the use of polypotum of say and says in lines in 9 and 10 give the rhythm a little boost. In this part of the poem, the speaker seems pulled into two directions at once depressed and yet also irritated with himself. Polypotum is also discussed further. It is on in there. So again, in this poem we can see other poetic lines like a Sisera. The Sisera is there. Then you can see alliteration is also there. You can see the Sisera here, I do believe, and then the comma is there. So and then here the Sisera is there. So when the one sentence end and the another section start, so we can call it Sisera. Alliteration is there. You can see alliteration. So here love is there, that, might, think. Alliteration is there. You can see here love and lies in the first line and two lines. Then in the third line, that, might, think, me, untutored. In fourth line, unlearned. In the fifth line, thus, thinking, that, thinks, simply, speaking tongue, slide, simple truth, suppress. In 9 number line, she. 11 line, seeming trust. 10 line, I. In 12 line, love, loves, told. 13 line, lie, and in 14 line, false, lies, fettered. So alliteration is used here. Assonance is also used here. We can see here simply by saying that though, no, lies, she, think, me, untutored, tooth. Subtitles, thinking, she thinks me. In line number 6, although, nose, paste. In line number 7, tongue. 9 number 8, thus, suppress. 9 number 9, she, unjust. 10, I, old. 11, loves, trust. 12, loves, told. 13, I lie, me, and we be. So assonance is there, alliteration is there, assonance is there, and consonance is also there. So what is consonance? It is the repetition of a vowel sound, repeating, and consonant means the repetition of consonant sound. So here we can say in the consonant, a variety of things you can see from line number 1, 2, 3. 3 has a lot of consonants, that, might, think, me, some, untutored, youth. In line number 4 also unlearned, words, flaws, subtitle. In line number 5, 6, 7 also simply, I credit, false, speaking tongue. So you can see that every line except 10 line everywhere is consonant. Let's talk about the metaphor. So here we can see that the metaphor is she is a maid of truth. So here the truth and she has here the she is as a symbol of truth. Here we can see the metaphor is there. She is made of truth and simply I credit her false speaking tongue. So these are the two metaphors used here in this poem. Again, if you talk about the polyphothum, so here thinking, things, simply, simple, says, loves, lies. These are the polyphothum used here in line number 5, line number 7, line number 8, line number 9, line number 10, 11, 12, 13 and 14. Then the another figure of speech we can see here, the pun is there. So you can see that the comedy is there but the sorrow is also there. So pun is there. Therefore I lie with her and she with me, and in our faults by lies we fatter be. That is a pun here we can see here. Again, the poem is also very rich because it asks rhetorical question, and here we can see in the number 9 and 10 the rhetorical question is like that. But very false says she, not she is unjust, and very false say not I that I am old. That is a rhetorical question here in number 9 and 10. Then the paradox is also there. You can see the paradox in line number 1 and 2. When my love swears that she is made of truth, I do believe her, though I know she lies. So paradox is also there. So paradox, what is paradox? So paradox is the error. Error. and the other meaning is also there. So you can see here. Now if you talk about the vocabulary of, so you can see that the made of truth means honest, faithful. Okay, that is the meaning of made of truth, honest or truthful. If you go to the another word, untutored means unexperienced person, untaught person. Unlearned means inexperienced, unaware. Subtitles means tricks and deceit. Past the best means old, no longer young. Wherefore means why. Unjust means dishonest, untruthful. Seeming trust means pretending to believe each other. And flatter means smooth, comfortable. Instead of challenging each other's bad habits and mutual deception, the lovers reinforce each other's bad habits. So these are the things which we can see here. And if you talk about the form of the poem, so as you know that it is a Shakespearean sonnet, so it has a 3 quatrains and 1 couplet is there. So sonnet number 138 is a Shakespearean sonnet. So Shakespearean sonnet have a complicated, demanding set of formal requirements. They are 14 lines long, written in a single stanza. Further, they are written in iambic pentameter and have a set rhyme scheme. Although Shakespeare didn't actually invent the Shakespearean sonnet, he did popularize the form, so much so that it now bears his name. A Shakespearean sonnet can be divided into 2 discrete sections. The first 12 lines from the first section, it can be further broken into 3 rhyming quatrains, and the final 2 lines a rhyming couplet, constituting the second section. The shift between these 2 sections is called the volta. It falls between lines 12 and 13. Volta is an Italian word, it means turn. The shift from sonnet's first section to its second constitute a kind of turn. The speaker of Shakespearean sonnet usually uses these as a point to reflect back on the poem. Sometimes the speaker introduces new ideas or arguments. Sometimes, as in sonnet 138, the speaker offers a kind of summary or recap for the poem. So in a Shakespearean sonnet, the volta comes very late. By contrast, in a Petrarchan sonnet, an earlier type of sonnet, it falls between line 8 and 9. That gives the speaker more time to reconsider things, to introduce new ideas. The speaker of Shakespearean sonnet has much less space to do so, and so the final 2 lines often feels like throwaways, but it is worth paying carefully attention to them nonetheless. They often crystallize or distills the poem's message, drawing out its contradiction or complication. Let's talk about the meter of this poem. So here we can say that in sonnet, this sonnet is written in iambic pentameter. So iambic pentameter has a didum rhythm. In other words, it alternate untrace and trace syllables. So iambic pentameter, iambic means what? The one untraced syllable followed by the trace syllable. So with the 5 feet in each line, there are 5 feet in each line, that is called as a meter. So therefore it is called as a pentameter. The reader can hear this rhythm in line number 2. For example, I am just reading it. You just constantly understand my reading. I do believe, though I know she lies. Okay, you know that I is a untraced syllable followed by do is a trace syllable. I do believe, though I know she lies. So this is the meter Shakespeare usually uses in his sonnets, and most sonnet writers in English have followed his example. Although iambic pentameter was relatively young tradition during Shakespearean life, in the 4th century since he wrote his sonnets, it has hardened into a rule. An acceptation, it has become one of the defining formal characteristics of the Shakespearean sonnet. Shakespeare is an acknowledged master of the form, using it naturally and fluidly. It does not seem to have hamper or constrain him, rather it forms a kind of foundation of the poem. Indeed, the poem is highly metrical regular with only a few variations. The most striking instances fall in line number 12. An age in love, loves not to have ears told. So here we can say that it is a combination of iambic pentameter with the torchic meter. So iambic meter is also there and torchic is there. Torchic means what? A trace syllable followed by untraced syllable. Here we can say that an age, in love, these are the iambic, but loves not, this is the torchic. And is the mirror image of iambic. Okay, it is called to the torchic meter. We are going to see it in detail when we deal with the practical criticism. To have ears told, ears told. Okay, so the repetition of the word introduces a torchic substitution in the middle of the line. That torchy falls in an unusual and disruptive place, causing a slight hiccup, a moment of syncope. The speaker seemed to get tripled up in this moment. The demands of age in love, that is being old in love, introduces a moment of hesitation and uncertainty. So, although Shakespeare is very adept at following the meter, he is not afraid to switch it up in order to achieve certain expression effect. Let's talk about the rhyme scheme of this sonnet. As you know that the rhyme scheme is very simple. That is the that Shakespearean sonnet has a distinct and demanding rhyme scheme, and it rhymes as A B C D C D E F G G G. The rhyme break the poem up into smaller units. Its first 12 lines from 3 rhyming quatrain, its last 2 lines from a rhyming couplet. There is a thus formal shift between line 1 and 12 and the lines 13 and 14. The rhyme scheme changes unexpectedly right in the poem ends. The shift is called as a holta or turn. The sonnet 138 uses strong and straightforward rhymes. Its rhyme word tend to be single syllable each, which be a few exceptions here and there. The poem stays away from weaker forms of rhyme like slant rhyme. The speaker of the poem thus feels powerfully in control of the poem, even as he wrestles with complex feelings, and Shakespeare characteristically respect the smaller units of the poem. It is rare, for instance, to find an enigmatic enjambment between the two rhymes. We can say here, truth, lie, youth, subtles, young, best, tongue, suppress, unjust, told, trust, told, me, be. So these are the rhyme. Okay. So let's analyze the poem, the last segment. The speaker of sonnet is involved in a complicated and difficult love affair. The speaker focuses on the dynamics of this love affair, the way that he lies to his mistress about his age, the way she lies to him about whether she cheats on him or not, and the way that both know the other is lying. This is, in other words, hardly an idyllic, idealized love affair. Instead, it is a consuming and compromising, characteristic by deceit and phanerona, rather than mutual understanding or mutual respect. In the context of Shakespearean full sonnet sequence, the speaker of this poem is traditionally interpreted as a man. The tone and context of Shakespearean sonnet are often bound up in what the relationship between men and women were like at the time these poems were written. So in this, so we can see here that thing is there. So hey guys, I hope that you have enjoyed this. So thank you for watching.